Progressive political commentator and co-host over at Hill TV's Rising, Krystal recently went on CNN to give her thoughts on the most recent Democratic debate, and I think it's worth watching. So I want to show you a clip of that, then we're going to come back and talk about it.
Let's bring in David Gregory, CNN political analyst, Bakari Sellers, CNN political commentator, and Krystal Ball, co-host of Rising on Hill TV and the author of the forthcoming book, The Populist's Guide to 2020. So Krystal, I'll begin with you. What about that moment? How do you think that Bloomberg, his much anticipated debut, went?
It was an utter and complete disaster, and I'm sure that he realized halfway through he should have just stayed home. He was doing better just buying paid media rather than having to actually respond to attacks. I mean, look, what is the pitch that Mike Bloomberg is making? He's making the electability pitch. Look, I am the guy, whether you love me or not, whether you like all my positions or not, I am the guy who can defeat Donald Trump. And last night on that stage, he looked like absolutely anything but that. And that is the major issue for him. And you have to think, look, John, you were pointing this out earlier. Bernie Sanders came into last night the front runner, the only candidate who really could even rival him in terms of ultimately winning the nomination seemed to be Michael Bloomberg. And that took a massive, massive hit last night.
Bernie Sanders came into this debate the front runner, period. I think he probably left the front runner as well. Elizabeth Warren, who has a debate performance that I think a lot of people, including you, looked at and said was terrific. What does she see as her path? I really want an answer. I'm curious. I'm trying to figure out what exactly she's doing now that she thinks will help her win the nomination. Does it go through Sanders supporters? Is it the other perceived lane right now?
Yeah, I think it's very tough for her at this point. And she did have a phenomenal debate performance last night. And I think she did herself a lot of favors. A lot of folks have already voted in Nevada, but I would certainly expect her to improve, especially with that white college-educated voter. And that gets to your question. Look, she and Pete and Amy primarily have been competing for that sort of white, affluent, liberal vote, which has been the vote that has shifted around the most, right? They were with Pete, and then they were with Amy, and now I would bet they would give Elizabeth Warren a look. That's enough to give you a bump in the polls. It is not enough, ultimately, to get you the nomination. I think that's the issue for her. Bernie Sanders has largely consolidated the progressive lane. So look, I think if you're her campaign, she thinks Amy had a moment. She was able to get the comeback narrative. If Warren can grab a second in Nevada and then hang on as best she can in South Carolina, head into Super Tuesday where California has been a relatively decent state for her, then maybe she can make a case. But I want to point out, maybe the most important answer of the night was when all of the candidates got asked what they would do if there was one candidate who had a plurality but not a majority of the delegates going to the convention. And every single candidate, including Elizabeth Warren and except for Bernie Sanders, said that they would let the convention rules play out, meaning that they want the superdelegates to try to get involved on their behalf. And if we come down to a contested convention where Bernie Sanders gets a plurality of the delegates but not a majority, that means things could get very, very ugly.
Bakari, I know we have to let you go, but I want to give you the last word because hang on one second, Dave, because Bakari's going to go, and I know Bakari actually has a point on this. Bakari, who helped write the current DNC rules on the conventions that Bernie Sanders might be upset about at convention time?
I think that's hilarious. Yeah, Bernie Sanders helped write the DNC rules that Bernie Sanders now doesn't want to follow. I just think that the rules are the rules. I mean, you can't get in the game and then say, I don't want to play by those rules. I do think, though, the party has not a decision to make, but has to understand that it will be messy. And I think that when you get to a convention, if it is contested and Bernie Sanders has a plurality by a large margin, Bernie Sanders is going to be the nominee. If it comes in and it's close, I don't know what will happen. So you just have to understand it's a bit of hypocrisy when you write the rules and then all of a sudden don't want to play by them.
All right, guys, stick around. I know Bakari's going.
All right, now that guy at the end there was clearly a hack, and of course they had to cut off Krystal there before she was able to respond. But this is one of the talking points with which the establishment is really starting to run with, which we're really starting to hear, so it's worth responding to. Obviously, just because Bernie Sanders supported the rule change because he wanted to get rid of superdelegates on the first ballot doesn't mean that he supports superdelegates on the second ballot, right? That was the compromise which he was able to get to. That doesn't mean that he wants undemocratic superdelegates to overturn the will of the people. It just means that he fought to get a more democratic system, and that's what he got. That doesn't mean that he still supports the undemocratic elements of the system as it exists, right? Like that, like Oh my goodness. But this is the argument which we're hearing, right? We're starting to hear a bunch of establishment hacks coming out saying, well, Bernie Sanders favored writing the rules. And that's the thing which they're going to try to use when they want to subvert the will of us and they want to overturn the election when Bernie Sanders comes out with a plurality of delegates. And by the way, this is super, super relevant right now. So this is the 538 forecast. You can see here, Bernie Sanders, of all the candidates running, is clearly the most likely to pull this thing out here with 34%, nearly 35% here. But no one. The likelihood of a contested convention, according to 538 right now, is more likely than Bernie Sanders winning. But Bernie Sanders is significantly more likely to win than anyone else on the stage, anyone else. And by the way, it's pretty uncommon for candidates to not reach that threshold. The last one to do it was John Kerry. So the fact that they got rid of superdelegates on the first ballot makes it so that it's more likely that you're not able to reach that 50% threshold. It's actually a pretty difficult thing to do. So it's not like crazy that this would happen. But of course, the fact that now they have superdelegates on the second ballot might mean that they just flip it around and subvert the will of the people. So it's a really messed up, like it's not a great, it's not a very ideal system, obviously. Now, the second point though I want to say is, another talking point, another argument which the establishment is really running with right now is they're saying, well, look, guys, you actually want superdelegates because we don't want a system where, someone could run away with 25, 30% of the vote and then ultimately win the nomination if, all these other candidates put together, maybe their ideas are more similar. And so overall, the sort of if you wanted to have a holistic account of the electorate, they're more likely to support another candidate than to support the candidate itself. And look, guys, here's the thing with that argument. I was on the debate team, and the thing that you need to be very careful with, the thing that's really hard to, learn, but that you have to learn in order to be a successful debater, is you can't get involved with every single nuance, every single twist and turn of the argument. What you need to do to respond to that argument, if someone is arguing with you on making that argument against you, what you need to do is just be like, sure, I agree with you. We need to have a holistic account of an electorate, and that's why we should implement ranked choice voting. We should not use undemocratic superdelegates to give us a holistic account of the electorate, because undemocratic superdelegates often come from a single sort of upper crust of society, which is not representative of the electorate itself. And then, just donezo, right? Just be like, sure, I agree with you. That's why we need to have ranked choice voting. Don't try to get into the twist and turns of the argument, because you've had those arguments before where you have the stronger arguments, but you sort of got into it and then you kind of came out of the argument kind of losing, even though you had the better arguments. Just avoid that. Just be like, look, yeah, I agree with you. That's why we need to have ranked choice voting. Done. Dunzo, and get into it, right? Don't try to get too much into it. Now, the other thing I do want to talk about in this video is I want to give you guys my view on how I think the debate went. And look, my take on it is obviously Michael Bloomberg got obliterated. Michael Bloomberg got destroyed in every single which way. Elizabeth Warren destroyed her. Joe Biden, Sleepy Uncle Joe, gave a hit, right? But Bernie Sanders gave a hit. Every single person hit Michael Bloomberg except for, billionaire lover Pete Buttigieg. He's the only one who didn't, probably because Pete Buttigieg would be a very likely VP pick for Michael Bloomberg. I mean, of course, we heard those stories that Hillary Clinton would be the VP pick. If Hillary Clinton was the VP, you literally could not pick. Like, if you wanted to pick a ticket that would lose to Donald Trump, that would be how you do it. Michael Bloomberg and Hillary Clinton, you will absolutely lose, no question about it. But Mayor Pete's probably a pick for Michael Bloomberg in terms of VP. Pete Buttigieg knows that, and so, that's why he didn't hit Michael Bloomberg. Michael Bloomberg just overall getting absolutely destroyed in every single which way. There is no consistent way in which Michael Bloomberg is able to pull this thing out. In fact, let me show you this right here. This is a quote here. Tell me if you know who this is from. My daughter is tall and busty and blonde. We went to China together, and what's a 16-year-old going to do on a business trip? So I got her some dates in every city in China. No, it's not Donald Trump. Guess what? It's Michael Bloomberg. Michael Bloomberg said this. Elizabeth Warren was absolutely right when she said, look, we can't replace one egotistical sexist billionaire for another. Bloomberg and Donald Trump are the same. They're identical twins. Bloomberg was a Republican. I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous. The idea that Bloomberg is electable is completely absurd. And I'm so glad that he got absolutely hit. And this debate, by the way, a lot of people watched it. It had the highest viewership ever. 20 million people watched that debate. 20 million people watched Michael Bloomberg got eviscerated, and way more people after that watched the highlight reels of Michael Bloomberg getting absolutely eviscerated. And so tied for coming in after Michael Bloomberg in terms of who lost the most, I have Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar. So Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar, the reason why I have them tied is honestly they kind of canceled each other out in terms of they were both bickering with one another. You know, Mayor Pete was attacking Klobuchar way too hard in my opinion. Like, I mean, he was honestly almost bullying her at some point. And Klobuchar was, bickering back and forth. At one point, Klobuchar turned to him and is like, "Are you calling me dumb?" And Pete's like, "No, of course not." But of course, like he clearly was. I mean, it was a ridiculous debate. I think Cenk Uygur had the best comment on their two back and forth. He was like, "It's like there was a mini kids table going on at the debate and they were kicking each other underneath the table." That's what it looked like. That's what it felt like. It felt awkward because it wasn't their bickering, their debate wasn't even connected to the other debate going on overall. So it just was like, what are you doing? Why are you distracting us with this nonsense bickering? Now, to be fair, Buttigieg was clearly told that he needed to hit Klobuchar, right? Because they share vote, like his strategist told him that. And to be fair, in terms of strategy, yeah, that's kind of what he needed to do. He needed to go after Klobuchar a little bit because Klobuchar saw that surge. They share voters together, and so Klobuchar represented a threat to Buttigieg. Even if Buttigieg knows that he can't ultimately win the nomination, it's important for him in terms of VP picks, in terms of cabinet picks. If a moderate ultimately wins, God forbid, and Bernie, I want Bernie Sanders to win, but if a moderate wins in terms of VP picks, in terms of cabinet picks, if he's able to consolidate a group of voters consistently, that's good for him, right? So he was clearly told that he needed to go after Klobuchar, but in my view, he went after Klobuchar honestly too hard. I mean, it really just it was, like I said, it was kind of like bullying at some points. It was really just, it was awkward. It was cringy. It was disgusting. And Klobuchar getting really personal with Buttigieg. But I do think that even though, yes, they sort of canceled each other out, Klobuchar might have benefited a little bit more than Buttigieg because Klobuchar may kind of be the sort of last viable moderate in some respects because Buttigieg kind of just looked disgusting attacking Klobuchar in the way that he did. Now, there is some evidence against my sort of argument here. If you look here at the betting markets, after the debate, Buttigieg is the one who kind of went up a little bit in the betting markets, but only like this much. It was mostly Bloomberg going down and Sanders going up. Even, by the way, Warren, who had a fantastic performance, and I'm going to get to that in a minute, Warren didn't really go up at all. She had this tiny, let me see if I can zoom in for you. Warren, that's Warren in the brown, like a tiny little bump from the debate. Not even really all that much. So even sort of people betting their money are kind of like, yeah, Warren had a great performance, but I don't know if that's really going to be able to transfer, especially when you consider money funding overall. Warren was in debt. She had to extend lines of credit. Warren has like no cash on hand, essentially. She has a massive burn rate. She was spending twice as much as she was taking in. I mean, if Warren is able to make it to the convention, which clearly she's outlined that that's her goal, right? She wants to make it to the convention, accumulate delegates in order to sort of see what happens if there's a contested convention. I mean, disgusting strategy. You can criticize that a million ways to Sunday, but that seems to be her strategy. Whether or not she's able to make it to the convention is another question. Now, anyway, when it comes to the two moderates, it's hard to tell between Buttigieg and Klobuchar who is ultimately going to get any kind of gain. I think that they just canceled each other out. I think the fact that they're knocking themselves out, but still are, doing well enough to possibly stay in the race really just benefits Bernie. So anyway, so the next candidate here is Joe Biden. I think Joe Biden did better than Klobuchar or Buttigieg because, no one really hit them, or no one really hit him. And I there was no hits landed, and he landed a few hits on Bloomberg, but honestly, people just kind of forgot about him, right? And so, I mean, there's two ways you can look at that. You can say that Biden is a loser because of that. He lost the debate because, look, I mean, this guy just a few weeks ago was the front runner. Just a few weeks ago. Like, it's hard to realize this, but it wasn't all that long ago when we were like, oh, will Bernie Sanders be able to surge up enough to be able to pass Biden? Now the question is, when will Biden drop out? I mean, and so the very fact that Biden got completely forgotten about on stage because no one is attacking him. Right? They're not attacking him because they don't see him as relevant anymore. And so you can say, oh, he stayed steady because no one attacked him. But the reason why no one was attacking him is because no one really thinks he's relevant anymore. He's just like, he's the Walking Dead now. He's a zombie, right? He's just a zombie on stage. He's sleepy Uncle Joe. Now, again, there were flashes of moments where there were flashes of his sort of former self in that debate. There were flashes, there were moments when, he was hitting Bloomberg and he did really good, but then he just sort of faded away and we forgot he was even up there. So he's, you could argue that he lost because, he used to be the front runner, or, you could say that he sort of stayed steady. You could take it either way. Now, tied for number one, I think, is Warren and Bernie. Now, the reason why I have them tied is a little bit complicated. So in general, there's three ways in which you could say someone won a debate, right? You could say that the person who has the best media bump won the debate, or you could say the person who is going to benefit the most in the long run from sort of how the debate turns out, you could say that person won the debate, or you could say the person who had the most substantive arguments won the debate, right? And so, look, when it comes to who had the most substantive arguments, I think Bernie, because at the end there, when they asked the candidates whether or not you're okay with undemocratic superdelegates overturning the will of the people, Warren said yes, she was comfortable with that. Bernie Sanders was the only candidate who said no. I think that the will of the people, I think the people should be the one deciding the election. In my opinion, that rules you out of contention when it comes to who had the most substantive arguments. If you think that superdelegates should be able to overturn the will of the people, overturn the person who got the most votes, like, in my opinion, you cannot say that, you cannot have a claim to have won the substantive side of the debate, in my opinion. So in that respect, Warren lost the debate. But in the respect of who got the media bump, I think clearly, you look at the news cycle after the debate, Warren won that. Warren won the debate in terms of who got the media bump, right? She just did. She just won the debate in that respect. Now, the third way in which you can account for it, like I was saying, is who won the debate in the long run. Like, who, based on how things will shape up, who won the debate? Bernie. Because Bernie is the front runner, no one was able to really hit him. Warren tried to land a few hits, but honestly, they all just sort of bounced off. They didn't really land in any kind of effective way. And Bloomberg had a weird line about communism, but honestly, you heard the audience groan. Everyone were like, "Oh, dude, what are you doing, man? What are you doing?" And Bernie had effective responses to that. So, I don't think that, the fact that Bernie Sanders was ahead and he's doing really well, he's now leading, he's like the polling in Nevada, he looks like he's going to serve into Nevada, possibly even win South Carolina. He was tied in South Carolina in one poll. So, at the very least, he's going to do well. I mean, this debate didn't do anything to change that. So you could argue in that respect, who does the shaping of this debate help in the long run? Bernie, because now Bloomberg, who was before possibly the biggest threat to Bernie Sanders, is either eliminated or at least took a serious blow. Now, you could argue that, look, Bloomberg is just going to flood the airwaves with more and more positive ads, and so he might be able to wash out the negative coverage which comes from the debate. And maybe we're going to have to see how that really shapes up. It's, genuinely, I don't know that there's really a way to tell how that's going to shape up. But clearly, I think that, Bernie won the debate in terms of long run. But he did, Elizabeth Warren won the debate in terms of the media bump. But even just in general, in terms of who performed the best in the debate, I think Bernie has a really, really good claim as well. In fact, he had a great hit on Pete Buttigieg. I want to show you that clip.
And that's what we are saying, Pete, is maybe it's a time for the working class of this country to have a little bit of power in Washington rather than your billionaire campaign contributors.
Fantastic hit right there. So Bernie had a great debate. Warren had a great debate. It was, it was by far and away the most exciting debate that we've seen so far. So, but in any case, if you like the video, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button and consider subscribing. Thanks.